Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, Starmer's Stasi remind you what terrible little tyrants they really are. As Peter Sweden points out here on X, British police visited and questioned a journalist in her home because someone was offended by a year-old tweet on X. Elon Musk's add to that, "This needs to stop." It should stop, Elon. But in the UK, we're ruled by people who despise us and think we're too stupid to formulate our own opinions on things. So when something notable happens, we should keep our mouths shut on the pain of being arrested and thrown in jail. We should, like good liberal citizens, just wait until the authorities and the government tell us what to think. Because they'd never lie, and they'd never push a narrative that modern Britain is a multicultural utopia, despite what our stupid racist lying eyes see. So what did this terrible, bigoted journalist do? Well, she doesn't know. In fact, nobody knows because nobody's allowed to know. According to the Daily Telegraph writer Alison Pearson, who's 64, claimed 2 police officers arrived at her house on Remembrance Sunday and told her that she'd been accused of a non-crime hate incident, something to do with a tweet she made a year ago, and apparently she was stirring up racial hatred. Again, according to the Mail, the police officer allegedly then said he was not allowed to disclose what Miss Pearson had said. And here's the Telegraph journalist in question, and Alison Pearson. Just look at her. Far-right bigot if I've ever seen one, with a blonde hair and blouse. I guess there's a Nazi armband just out of shot. Now, obviously, I don't know what she said, but it seems unlikely she said something that bad. She's a middle-of-the-road Tory boomer writing for the Telegraph. It's hardly like she's posting on Stormfront. But this is where we're at in modern Britain now. If you offend the liberal order, you might get a visit from the police. You don't know what you've done. It seems they don't know what you've done half the time, but you might be in serious trouble, so you best keep your mouth shut, you evil bigot. This whole thing has led many to compare the situation with Franz Kafka's The Trial, the story of a man who's arrested, but he doesn't quite know why, sent on trial and can't figure out what on earth is going on. He has lawmen, religious men, and nobody can work through the bureaucratic structure that oppress him. I do get that analogy. It is scary what we're experiencing at the moment. We never know if we've said anything wrong or right half the time, and some people get sent to jail for tweets, and Hugh Edwards goes free for child abuse images. Yet for me, our modern police remind me of a scene in Adam Curtis's great documentary Bitter Lake. The documentary focuses heavily on Afghanistan, specifically the recent war there, and there's a fascinating clip which I'll show you where the British soldiers realise they're being used by the local Afghanis. Essentially, they will tell the British that their enemies are Taliban, so they wipe out their opposition.
The dynamic was one of manipulation. They understood how we saw the conflict. They presented their local group conflict, their civil war between groups that had been going on for 35 years. They presented everything in that dynamic. So they came to us and said, those people over there are Taliban. And we went, okay, and we went off and dealt with them. But actually we were dealing with their previous enemies, so we were just creating more enemies for ourselves. And you ended up in a downward spiral where, because everyone was manipulating us, we ended up fighting everyone.
Seems to me a similar thing is happening with our police. I don't doubt that individually they're alright people. I'm sure they view lots of this as absurd too. But it seems to me that anybody from a supposedly minority or quote-unquote vulnerable group can say, that person's bullying me and I'm offended, and then they have to go and knock their door down at 3 a.m. Seems to me, instead of enhancing social harmony, they're destroying it and creating a dystopian totalitarian state while they're at it. And what's the globalist liberal solution to this? They're going to crack down on so-called misinformation, which basically means any information they don't like. We've already seen Keir Starmer talk a lot about supposed misinformation on Twitter, though that's also where we're getting lots of genuine information. The Australians are set to bring in a misinformation bill that is a massive threat to their freedom of speech. And we're also getting pieces like this from liberal outlets stating that to save our democracy, we must get rid of online anonymity. That's me screwed, eh guys? Of course they'll say they have to bring this in to save democracy and counter hate, but in reality it's to name and shame and ban anybody who doesn't go along with the liberal dictates. We're living in some crazy times, eh friends? Let me know what you think about this madness down below. Do consider subscribing to the channel if you know.